All right. We're going to start the video for finishing up chapter 5 and then completing chapter 6, 7, finishing part 2 of your book. And then we'll have part 3 in class. Just like last time, I'm going to turn off the video when I go in the share screen, just so I make sure that this gets done today so you have it and work on it. And just like the last video, there will be a participation hidden in the video, and you are going to um, post thereafter after you hear it. Watch the whole video though, because it covers stuff for the test and stuff that is relevant to your speech, including the inclusion speech that I give to all my classes, which is very important. So um, let's get started. And I need to get the screen set up. Oof. Oof, tired. All right. I'm here at the beautiful campus of Southgate again, just FYI. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we are looking right now at chapter 5, which we covered the terms. So chapter 5, just a reminder, is about listening and the importance of listening. To be a good public speaker and be a good communicator, you have to be a good listener. And it's required for this course that I teach you the importance of listening. And we actually have an assignment that is connected to you being a good listener. And that will be explained a bit in this chapter. So we covered the terms already. Let's go over the items here. Listening barriers. In your book, it talks about listening barriers. Lots of different reasons. One of the words you learned about this is prejudice. Prejudice, not just in the traditional sense, but also in the sense of prejudice against information. Like you don't want to hear it because it goes against your beliefs or something like that, right? So the best way to understand listening barriers is twofold. One, think about who in your life is a has a listening barrier, who's a bad listener, right? Parent, sibling, significant other, friend, instructor, teacher, future coworkers, who knows? Um, and just diagnose why they're a bad listener. So, for example, my mother is a bad listener. She is for two reasons. One, she's physically a bad listener because she's half deaf. And she's only just because her hearing's getting worse, she's now finally wearing her hearing aid. She has had a hearing aid since I was a kid, and she never wore it. So she's like a bad listener physically. And then personally, psychologically, she's a bad listener because my mom's stubborn. She's very stubborn, and you have to repeat yourself a lot. So there's times that people witness what I have talking to my mom, and they think I'm a bad son because I'm like raising my voice and saying it over and over again. But that's the way it is because my mom is a bad listener for two major reasons. But a lot of times, here's some examples students have given. Since we're not in the classroom or we're not meeting, I'll give you examples students have given. Um, some people cut you off while you're talking. Some people get distracted while you're talking. Some people think that you have no standing to them because maybe they're older, like a parent will sometimes treat you like you're a kid. Um, you don't have the experience, stuff like that. There's lots of reasons why people are just bad listeners, right? And then to really understand listening barriers, you got to diagnose yourself, diagnose your own problems. So what do I mean by that? Well, I have a couple listening barriers myself. One, I'm very impatient, kind of like how I drive. So if I know how the story is going to end, which is really difficult for me because I am actually very good at predicting stuff. If I already know how it ends, I'm like, wrap it up. In my head, I'm like, wrap it up. And sometimes with that, I give away that facial expression. So I can be quite impatient. And these are more personal conversations. I'm not like this at work because, you're professional. And then the other listening barrier I have is I'm arrogant. I know everything kind of stuff. I always make the joke that people say I have an ego. That's not true. When you have an ego, you're not perfect, and everyone knows I'm perfect. But anyways, but arrogance is a listening barrier I have where I'm like, I already know this stuff, or I know better, stuff like that. It was by the way, at my around your age, early in my college life, I came from magnet school. I was considered, a smart kid and so forth. So when I went to community college for the first 2 years, I thought I knew everything. I didn't think I had to go to orientation and stuff like that. I really went back. If I go back, I wish I listened to others. So you got to be a good listener. So diagnose your own problem. Give you a few seconds to think about it, and then think about how did this affect others, and might affect your ability to succeed. And then you'll understand. So go through the listening barriers in the book as well, and let's look at them. Let's go into listening styles. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This is definitely going to be on the test. There are four types of listening styles. Now, just FYI, we're sometimes a little bit of both, or three, or maybe even all four, but we tend to gravitate towards one way or another. And these listening styles is explaining how certain listeners listen, right? So take the first one, for example. By the way, there's no wrong answer here. There is no one is better than the other. All right. There's no one is better than the other. So relational orientated listeners. These are folks who tend to gravitate towards listening towards people's feelings and emotions. They like the emotional approach with the speaker. These listeners tend to favor emotional or feelings orientated messaging. Right? Tend to listen to that more. Task orientated are people who like orders, right? They like a checklist in their mind. Like you got to do this, this, and this, and this, that kind of stuff. Chronological speaking, those types of listeners favor that. Lots of different things. So that is task orientated listeners. Analytical are people who like to hear all the information, everything, and especially complex stuff. They want to hear all of it. They don't want just the simple stuff. They want to hear everything. They take in all the information. Finally, critical, they're a little bit like analytical. They take in information, but while they're taking it in, they're criticizing it, they're questioning it, they're analyzing it, and so forth. So these are the listeners that are better listener. They tend to listen towards messages that lets them process it as you go along. All right. So four different listening styles. You tend to gravitate towards one in your head right now. Think about which one of those four is you or closest to you. Don't say, relational task or critical and relational, or don't say two. Just in your mind, just think of the one that you tend to favor. And when you figure that out, you're going to be able to figure out, okay, well, how do I send out a message that can be picked up by all four of these folks, right? All if my audience has a little bit of four in it. Now, this is more advanced public speaking, but this gets you in start in thinking that way. Last but not least, analyzing and evaluate speeches. So how do we figure out you are listening in this class? Well, at the end of each speech, you have to, after the speeches are over, you have to evaluate one student, only one student. The form will be posted on files, just like all the other important documents. And as long as you're following there's two ways I judge it. If you follow the directions I give, and also if it's obvious that you listen to the speaker. So when you get the form, there's like the rule of every section has to have two sentences. If you do pretty much, if you do all the that, if you, it's like one page of work. It's not even that. If you do 2 sentences per section, you pretty much covered it all. That's like an easy 10 points. And I look at the sentences and I'm like, oh yeah, that person actually did pay attention to his speech, 10 points. It's when you don't follow those basic directions that you lose points. It's like the easiest 10 points in the class. And you have to do that for all 3 speeches. All right. Unfortunately, there is no way for you to ask me questions when I record these videos, but we do meet. So if you ever have a question during this stuff and you want more explanation, you know how we have the first 10 minutes of class set aside for stuff like this? Have your questions ready and when we see each other again. All right, let's keep going. So there we go. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is analyzing your audience. Chapter 6 is very important. It's probably the most important early chapter because it gives you a lot of information. And it's actually 2 slides. Chapter 7 is actually a very short chapter. We're going to go through the terms and everything pretty quick. So make sure you're taking notes since I can't talk to you and get feedback from you as we go along. All right, open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are any questions that you give that they could put in anything they want. Just think about when you've taken tests in classes. When you have to answer it with an essay or a paragraph, that's an open-ended question because in that paragraph or essay, you can write whatever words you want. I mean, you might get a 0, but write anything you want. I think the best example of this is fill in the blank. And the reason why I think fill in the blank is, a good example for public speaking is because you have a sentence that's pretty much done, except for this one blank line that you put in one word, maybe 2. You can put in like any word you want, right? Unless they have a list next to it saying one of these words, which would make it a closed-ended question. If you can fill in any word possible, that's an open-ended question. So that's fill in a blank is probably one of the best examples of open-ended questions. All right. Closed-ended question. Excuse me. Closed-ended questions is any type of questions where you limit the options. I already gave you a quick example of one, but the best example of closed-ended question is the kind of questions you get for your midterm and final, which is multiple choice questions, where you only can choose from 4 choices. True and false tests, those are also multiple choice questions. When you have a list of words that you can choose from on the side, and you can only choose from those words, closed-ended questions. Now, you're probably wondering, why is analyzing your audience asking questions? It's one of the simplest ways to analyze your audience. If you ask them questions, you get instant feedback. Here's the thing. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. Even if you're an advanced speaker, I don't do it. I don't like doing that. Either in class, even when I do stand up, I hate asking. By the way, I've seen so many comics try to do that crowd work, and they ask a question of the audience, and the person doesn't correspond or doesn't even answer. It's actually pretty hard to watch. So the reason why you never ask questions, open-ended or closed-ended questions, or any questions to your audience, is because you risk them taking over or throwing you off or becoming a major distraction. Even raising your hand questions. I mean, what if you have a little old lady who's very slow and her husband's even slower and they're in front? You're waiting for them to raise their arms and they're barely getting it up while everyone is watching this. So don't ask questions to your audience. There's one we're going to learn about later, but for now, never ask your audience a question. Most of this chapter is about audience analysis, for especially for the first slide. Let me give you the official definition. So I gotta open the book real quick. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge on the next 2 terms. All right, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Sorry, but when I get to Southgate, I have driven and I had to drive through traffic today, so I'm extra yawn. I don't know. You say Yanni? That's a name of a famous Easy Rock singer, I think. Oh well, anyways, Audience analysis, examining information about your listeners. That's what that is. So anytime you get information about your audience, that's audience analysis. That's all it is. Audience adaptation is ethically using your information to customize your speech to the audience. So audience analysis is you know about the audience going in. Audience adaptation is you ethically customizing your speech for that audience. So, for example, your first speech is fellow college students, which is like the easiest audience for you. So you don't really have to shift your speech that much, considering that everyone in the class wants a grade and they're not going to want you to mess them up. So they're not going to mess you up either. So it's pretty easy. But audience adaptation is when you take that information. Remember, there's ethics involved. So you don't talk down to your audience and so forth. We'll talk about it more in a bit. So I just want to get through these terms. Demographics, let me give you the official definition, are statistics of audience characteristics such as age, gender, sexual orientation, race, and culture, group membership, socioeconomic status. Demographics. It's what I always say, there's a physical nature to demographics where you can point and say, okay, that person is this or that, right? Even religion is a demographic. And for the most part, you can't really tell unless you stereotype people. But a lot of people who are religious wear something to show their religion, like people who wear crosses on their neck, necklaces. That's, you can see it. You can see it. If you see a Jewish person with yarmulke, wearing a yarmulke, or stuff like that. So it's physical in nature. Even the stuff like, uh, and socioeconomic status, that's physical in nature because you kind of can tell, right? So the $500 suit or the $5,000 suit versus the suit bought at the place where you buy three for 129. So it's kind of physical in nature. Demographics kind of physical in nature. So here's some ones that they identify that are important. There's a lot of them. There's age. We always forget about age, so forth. But here's a couple of the key ones. That's on in your chapter. Gender. Now it's important to understand gender identity, right? This is how people feel about themselves and identify their gender and so forth. My gender identity, obviously, I'm a man, right? I'm a man and so forth. Um, I'm very secure about myself, so I don't talk endlessly about being a man. But so that's my gender identity, a comfortable male, right? Confident, comfortable male, right? But there's such a you guys can't see it because the video's off, but my lights got turned off. Just give me a moment. I just don't want people walking into a dark room when me looking into a computer. All right, so um gender identity, like I said, it's okay. First off, let's get some misconceptions out of the way. The whole gender fluidity thing has been around forever. All right. And I can say that confidently because you can go into history books and you can find that. Like when we went to Afghanistan, when our military went to Afghanistan, they had to explain the role of ladyboys to the military members because they said if you deal with the elders, you're going to see ladyboys, which are effeminate men that tend to be the assistants or kind of servants in a way to elders, right? And there's a lot to it there. We're not talking about it, but pretty much all these cultures around the world have some kind of gender fluidity in its history. In the Americas, in the Native American culture, in the African cultures, you think about the movies that have been recently made about women warriors of Africa, right? Um, you have, and I'm not talking the fictional one. There are real stories of women warriors of Africa, um, Asia, Middle East. There is a great information about the Philippines, for example. So lots of different things. Drag has been around forever. Military members did it as a tradition when they passed the equator. The first major television star, Milton Berle, became popular because he did drag on television. So gender fluidity has been around forever. It's just that we're just being more respectful to it. That is all. There's no agenda being pushed. There's no none of that. I'm on the side of saying you shouldn't make it complicated or difficult to understand. Just make it simple. You don't have to have all the terms. Just, just explain it simply, right? But it's been around forever, so don't get held up by it. Don't whatever. And it's important to understand that because we live in a society where you can have more masculine women and more effeminate men. And like I always say that the one of the most effeminate men I've ever met in my entire life, more feminine in nature than the way that person represented themselves and talked, is married to one of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my entire life. So you can't put people into like that's a dude that has to act a certain way and it's a woman that has to act a certain way when gender fluidity has been around forever. And by the way, FYI, the first people that ever wore dresses were men. The first people that ever wore wigs were men. Wore heels were men. Wear makeup were men. So again, gender fluidity has been around forever. So when you're talking about the biological side of it, you're talking more on sex, and that's the next term. Sex is biological nature. Born a man, you're born a woman. Your gender identity might be fluid, but physically, that's what you're born as, right? There's some variance in that, in a way. There's things XY chromosomes, development, so forth. There are some other things I'm not going to talk about. And then there are people who can physically change their biological sex as well. Just FYI, everyone knows my first name is Leslie. It's Professor High in this class, but for the sake of this discussion, lecture, my first name is Leslie. There were years I went by Les, even though I prefer Leslie. I've always preferred Leslie. My grandpa was Les. I'm Leslie. But I went by Les for years because I felt sorry for people who got, you know, embarrassed by getting my gender wrong. They're like, "Hi, can I talk to Miss Hyatt?" And I'm like, "I'm here." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry." So I felt bad for those folks. So I went by Les for a bit, for well over 10 years, and never liked it. And then one day I had a volunteer from my past who found themselves and fully transitioned and is a wonderful, strong trans woman now. And I sat there thinking about it one day and I thought about her strength and what she showed me as an individual. And I'm like, I shouldn't give a crap if people, get it wrong. So just FYI in this class, when it comes to that issue, because of friends and people I've known over the years, I don't I don't mess around with intolerance or disrespect on that issue. Because like I myself, I go by my full first name again because I learned from a dear friend that you be yourself. And I just happen to be a confident, comfortable male that first name is Leslie. That's it. All right. So though I get that out of the way, I talk about that more than the other ones because of all the debate and ridiculousness that's going on right now. All right. Culture. Culture, let me give you the official definition. Culture, where's the definition? Uh, Culture is the learned system of knowledge, behavior, attitude, beliefs, values, and norms shared by a group of people. So this is like all the different things and identifiers and so forth, right? Knowledge, behaviors, attitude, beliefs, and so forth. But this is a very testable question because this is going to be in the lecture part. Remember things I introduced to you, and what I'm going to hint, nudge, nudge. What I'm going to introduce to you right now is I'm in firm belief that I think culture should be added when you're talking about individual groups, they should be added when you're describing the groups. So for me, I try to say, instead of saying Mexican American, I would say Mexican American culture or white culture or black culture or female culture or male culture or Islamic culture or Christian culture or you understand what I'm saying? So I add that word out of respect, but it also demonstrates that there's depth to it. Because one of the big problems that people do when analyzing your audience is like, I'm in front of a bunch of Latinos, so I can automatically assume that these Latinos are just like the Latinos I know from where I'm from, when in reality, that's false. So I always say Latin culture instead of just Latin American, because Latin culture in Fresno is much different than Latin culture in LA. In Fresno, it's pretty much, Mexican. And we're very influenced by the farm worker community. While in LA, there's more diversity in the Latin culture. And you guys got rid of the farm worker culture when you put that Dodger Stadium in Chavez Ravine. So, yeah. So there's depth, just like where I live in Alhambra, Chinese American culture. More first, second, third generation, higher percentage of them than the Chinese American culture in San Francisco. And the same thing for lots around the world. If you are a woman in a blue state, you have a different situation than a woman in a red state right now, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of depth there. So I just don't use a broad brush. I like to say culture, at the end of demographics. So hint, nudge, nudge. You'll get a question like, which term does your professor also recommend using when talking about the depth in a demographic? Culture. Ethnicity is the portion of a person's cultural background that includes such factors as nationality, religion, language, and ancestral heritage. A group of people who have a common geographic origin as well. I need to go back and tell my other classes about geography. All right. Anyways, ethnicity. Ethnicity is one of those terms that gets grouped in with race. And I'm going to give you the definition of race. Race is a term that has evolved into a group of people with common cultural history, nationality, geographic location, as well as genetically transmitted physical attributes. Here's the thing. I personally, because ethnicity and race is used essentially to talk about skin tone, right? I think ethnicity is a better term. I think race is outdated, right? There's scientists that says limited amounts of race, and also I think race is outdated because of the Latin American culture. Mexican. The word Mexican originates from the word mesa, which means mix. So, in the mix between indigenous and Spanish heritage, right? And same thing with Brazilian, indigenous mix with Portuguese, right? And I don't think race truly qualifies and truly explains Latin skin tone, but ethnicity does. Ethnicity does a really good job about it. And a lot of other Asian cultures as well, African cultures, European cultures, ethnicity is right? It's better, a lot more correct. I think race is just outdated. That's just me. Don't worry, you're not going to get that on the test, but I'm just preference wise. I think when you're talking about skin tone, ethnicity is better. We're going to skip ethnocentrism. We're going to go on social economic status. Social economic status is a person's perceived importance and influence based on such factors as income, occupation, and education level. This is where the money is. This is where money is. An education level tends to suggest that you get paid more. So it's important to understand that this is income, occupation, education level. It does not mean things like ethnicity or language. One of the things that people think is, oh, if you're a Spanish speaker in the United States, you're more likely to be on lower socioeconomic status. That is not true. And does it no way directly mean education level has a more of a direct link, occupation as well, language, ethnicity, age, gender, and socioeconomic statuses are more stereotyping and are not ethical to use. So you might get a question like, which of these is not a socioeconomic status? And so if you see something like language, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, yeah, and then that's definitely not a socioeconomic status, even though some people think it is. All right. We're going to move to back to ethnocentrism. It is not a demographic. So that's why I save it for last. It's the assumption that your own culture approaches are superior to those other cultures. It's okay to be proud of your heritage, in a ethical way. It's okay to say, hey, we should learn from this culture and so forth. That's perfectly fine. Like, I think when it comes to history, we should learn from German culture. I'm half German because Germany, modern Germany, tells everything about their history. Everything, even the bad, the very bad. They teach it. All right. They teach all of it, unlike here in the United States. So I don't say it's superior, but I say we can learn from it. See the difference there? Same thing with history in Mexican culture. On average, Mexican citizens know their history better than US citizens know their history on average. So that's a culture that we can emulate. Yeah, Mexican culture, not Mexican American, Mexican culture. Anyways, it's not something we can emulate. So it doesn't mean something is superior. It just says we can learn from it. Do you see the difference? Anytime you're like, my culture is better than yours, then you're getting into the prejudice, discrimination, racism part. All right. Unfortunately, I can't ask you if you have questions right now since this is a recording, but I can say if you have questions on this, please save them to when we meet next time. I am going to introduce one demographic that's not on there. It's going to be on the test, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And that one is geography. Geography. This is going to be in the lecture part of the test, geography, where you are born or raised. And that's important to the distinction right there. And the reason why is this. Um, when you are talking about um, when you're talking about geography, you're indicating where you grew up, right? And our experiences are different. It's kind of like socioeconomic status. By the way, socioeconomic status is a great way to bridge gaps. Poverty knows no prejudice, right? Poverty knows no prejudice. Geography is another one because even if you're from different parts of the city, living in a city is different than living out in the country, out in the suburbs or stuff like that. So growing up in those areas is different. And also geography refers to the experience that you're in. So Fresno and LA, different experiences. Lots of the same different demographics, but the experiences are different. Fresno is the poorest city in California. LA is the second largest city in the United States. Fresno is more mixed in the sense of living comparative to LA, where the LA area is one of the most segregated areas in the United States. So again, geography plays an important role. So like being born on the West Coast and being born in the East Coast, different experiences growing up. So geography is an important part, different countries, different so forth, not just nationality, it's also the land because, that plays a factor. There's more to it, but just remember geography is going to be on the test. All right, so let's talk about the important sections of this chapter. Analyze your audience information. That's one of them, right? That's an important one. There's two ways to do it. One is with questions, something I told you not to do. But you can, you know, um, you can ask it. I'll explain it later. But there's a question where you can get responses without having them take over your speech. But never ever ask the question ever. You don't want them to take over your speech. That's why you don't ask questions. The best way to analyze your audience is get that information, especially before the speech, so you can ethically adapt to it. Get those demographics. Age is a good example, right? When I'm speaking to my morning classes, I'm pretty much speaking to people in their late teens or early 20s. When I'm speaking to a night class, I have a higher percentage, not that much, but I do have a greater chance or a greater percentage of students who are returning students in their 30s and 40s and stuff like that. So keep that in mind. Okay. Take in the information. Your first your audience is super effective, easy, because it's just fellow students who are going through the same thing you are doing. So it's a good idea to understand your audience and to know them beforehand so you can better adapt to it. All right. And when it comes to demographics, they fall under two areas: biological and society indicators. Biological, you're talking about biological sex, ethnicity in the sense of skin tone, age, and so forth, right? When you're talking about society indicators, you're talking social economic status, you're talking gender identity, you're talking group membership, and so forth, right? You're talking that stuff. You have to understand that demographics usually fall under that. So let me give you an example of two that some people say can be in both. One is religion. People say it's biological in a way because you're born into a religion. Think about it. If you are Catholic now, there's probably a good chance you were born into a Catholic family. All right. Most people who are religious, it's hereditary in a way. You pass on your religion to the next person. So that's one thing, right? So that's the thing is, oh, excuse me. Some people think because you're born into it, it's kind of biological because it's from your family and so forth. But in reality, it's still a social indicator. You could still say no when you're old enough. You can walk away from the church or temple or whatever it is, or you can walk to a temple, church, or mosque. All right. So it's your choice, and that's why it's a society indicator, 100% society indicator. There's another one that's controversial, and that's sexual orientation. Now, I'm on the side of a great philosopher, wise in their words, which is, I was born this way, but from the philosopher Lady Gaga. And essentially, I am of the belief that sexual orientation, people are born gay, or bi or so forth. They're born that way. And I'm on that not just because of studies and research and so forth, it's because of personal information from dear friends. I might be a straight, boring white guy, but a lot of my friends aren't. And one of my dear friends who I be careful when you ask questions about this because he has passed away, dear friend of mine. But he used to say everything about him was gay except for one part, indicating who he was attracted to. Everything about him was straight except for one part was gay, who he was attracted to. And he was. I mean, I remember female friends asking me about, is he single? And I'm like, yeah, he is. Do you know a guy? But the fact of the matter is, he and countless friends and research and all that stuff will tell you they're born gay, and I'm on that side. I know there are some people saying it's a choice, it's a lifestyle choice, but as one person told me, considering all the hardship and problems, you know, why would you make that choice if you didn't weren't, born away? That friend of mine told me that. He said he probably would have had an easier life, financially and success. He was very successful, but it was a burden. Let's see. So they fall under those two indicators. And then finally, demographics, understanding and knowing your speakers and showing representation or showing respect, right? I can't show up to a speech and then all of a sudden say, well, because I grew up and I'm very influenced by African American culture, I'm at this moment African American. Of course not. Don't ever do that. Don't ever try to say, oh, I didn't scold the comedian. I just told him don't do it because he said, oh, he said on his jokes he had a black card, and I'm like, no, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't usurp. Don't cultural appropriate somebody else. But when you demonstrate your respect for culture or community, you are branching over to that group, and that reassures them on your message and gives them respect, makes accommodates. There's a lot of good positivity there. And forget about the audience for a second. It impacts you, makes you more confident going in that you're prepared for it. It makes you more successful because you reach out and branch off into a group, or maybe reassures if you're that culture already, reassures how you feel. Very important. And that leads into the inclusivity speech. I'll take a moment. I'm going to stretch a little bit. We still have the rest of chapter 6 and 7 to cover before we're done with this video. Your participation is coming up. So let's talk about inclusivity. And to do so, I need to turn off the screen. And go back on camera. Hi. So before we do today's participation, I need to give the inclusivity speech. Now, you already heard me talk about the importance of being respectful to others in class and the social contract and all the stuff that is required for me to say. I told you, all that good, greater good stuff to push it aside and care about yourself, and you want to be better networkers and so forth, and just don't be a jerk, right? And that's the reason why you're being inclusive. Why inclusivity? And being inclusive doesn't mean that you change your beliefs or something. It just means that you're just respectful. That's it. There are folks that I disagree with. I think I think not political beliefs, but because there are a lot of, I have dear friends of mine that are on the opposite side politically. One of my references, a professor, a fellow professor. He was my professor at one time. Complete opposites. And we get along great. So, but my thing is when people are ignorant or prejudiced of learning new things, I have a problem with that. I'll be perfectly honest. But I don't, you know, I'm not a jerk towards them. Sometimes I would like to yell at them, and it's difficult. And I trust me, there's people on the left. I'm on the left. There's people on the left who are like that. But I don't be a jerk. I'm not a jerk, and I'm respectful to others and so forth. Like I got it. I'm not anti-vax. I believe in science, stuff like that. I had a disagreement with a student not long ago, and in no time did I say you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, or whatever. I went back and forth with the student and just said, hey, listen, here's some things you need to know. All right. Just be respectful. Just, it's not hard. Just don't be a jerk. That's why you need to be inclusive because you might be able, by not being a jerk, and this is why, I talk about other people, but just think about yourself for a second. You don't be a jerk because when you're a jerk, you cut off possibilities. You do. You cut off possibilities. And so, like, there are people that I have helped convince about branching out from their comfort zone because that's my thing. It's like, hey, find out information, read up, right? I could tell you the root of the things I disagree with because I looked at the information. But there's people who are not willing to look at information at all. So, because they want to stay in their comfort zone. So, by me not being a jerk, I maybe can get that barrier away. So, don't be a jerk. That's number one. You already heard that. That's the reason why. You don't want to cut off the access that you might have. If you're a jerk about it, you're gonna lose that possibility. And then the second reason I told you to be selfish. You know, the example of I talked about the kids who well, I'm sorry. I go back and I say when you are selfish when it comes to inclusivity, meaning that you are branching out and being respectful to others because it's best for you. You have a greater chance of networking. You have a greater chance of connecting with your message, greater chance of meeting new friends. Heck, you have a greater chance of dates, right? And the example I always use is I go to these schools, these high schools, and I hear homophobic comments, and I'll take them, and it's always boys. It's always boys. Take one of the boys. Never do it. I never do this. I try never to do this in front of the other boys. Take one of the boys or the boy who's causing this off to the side. Say, hey, listen, I'm not going to try to change your mind, whatever. But I just want you to think about this. That gay kid that you're hating on, or the gay culture you're hating on in front of kids who might be gay right now, they might be friends with the girl you want to date. Isn't prom coming up? You read those articles of those famous female singers and actresses, they talk about their gay best friend. You might be hating on somebody that causes you to lose a date. And it's always like this. Like this, it's like that shock, a realization. Oh my gosh, I'm hurting myself. And that's what you do. So you should care about yourself when it comes to inclusivity, because the more you branch out, the better chance you have at whatever success you're going for. Because when you cut that off, you're like, I don't care about that, I'm not going to be respectful and so forth, you're hitting a ceiling. So a good example, it just happened recently, the whole Bud Light controversy. Bud Light was, I don't know why some movements are anti-business now, but they are. Some movements are becoming anti-business. And Bud Light made a business decision. The trans community, it's a growing community. Population's growing, so a percentage of the population that trans is also growing. By the way, that's every time I hear someone says, "Oh, there's an increase in the gay and trans community," it's yeah, because the population is growing. And also we're being more respectful, so they feel more comfortable, more safe. That's all it is. There's no agenda, not changing anything. But when Bud Light decided, hey, here's a growing community, let's corner the market. There's an influential trans person. We're going to have her do a 45-second ad. We're going to create a can. By the way, that can needs to be in the Smithsonian now. That's how crazy people got. And Bud Light did that. And they wanted to increase their stuff. They were thinking about themselves and we're like, we're going to do that. And what happened was by them being respectful to others, a sub segment, a portion of the population got really worked up. The anti-trans folks, they got really worked up and they went nuts. They went crazy. You had Kid Rock shooting cans in his like backyard. You had people who don't have Kid Rock money going to Walmarts and taking like stuff and destroying property by destroying Bud Light cans. They don't have Kid Rock money, so they can't afford a good defense attorney. They did a hard time for that issue. And for nothing, because after a few months, people stopped talking about it. They caught Kid Rock with the can of Bud Light, and then like a month later, he's like, the boycott's over. But you know what happened? What happened with that? The people who, and that they were more on the conservative side, they're on the conservative side, on the right. And the people who, oh, this is the lights going off. Excuse me. You got a stupid motion sensor. Anyways, what they did was they ended up hitting that ceiling because in that little craziness that they created, that over response, they pushed off a bunch of people that might have listened to them or might have been inclusive towards them. So people who are trans or allies to trans, after seeing that, they're like, I'm not going to listen to Kid Rock ever again, or watch the other big like Fox News or other people. I'm surprised, so and so was like this. And then it's not just those people, it was also people who didn't care. They're like, why are people shooting up cans for this thing that's just a stupid commercial? 45-second ad. Why are people doing that? They're they're going nuts for something. Or the people who are watching that dude at that Walmart hitting and destroying the cans. You're like, I was gonna buy that. And by the way, the boycott, they ended up buying products that were also made by the same company. So the company never got hurt either. The trans community is still flourishing, still, still growing, or, safer, whatever. But they ended up alienated a bunch of others by over responding and being intolerant, anti-inclusion. So the only agenda you should have is yourself, which is don't be a jerk and cut off people. And the other reason why is because you want to network and connect with the most people possible. And by being inclusive, you help yourself. And that's what's important. And in doing so, you do help the greater good. But don't tell anyone. All right. We're going to move on. Oh, let's do the participation. All right. So I teach a class called intercultural communication. So my favorite subject in comm studies by far, by far. Even though I'm more of an argumentation person, I love intercultural communication. Love it. And one of the things I talk about is this exercise called diversity of one. And diversity of one is when you analyze yourself and you jot down all the demographics and group membership that you're part of. And when you do so, what we normally do is then share like one of the more unique ones, and people raise their hands, and you will find that you branch out so well, right? So your thing today is to, in the replies, mark down at least five to 10. Don't go 15, 20, 5 to 10 demographics that you fall into. And by the way, don't choose the boring ones. Don't choose, like, I would not put straight white male, right? Pretty boring. Just saying female is pretty boring too. But any kind of struggle, or actually no, females would be fine because there's struggle there. There's a story there. So anything that overrepresented, a lot of this is overrepresented in the media, right? Don't, but and so like the first time I did this, I had like everyone say like straight is very over. It's the most overrepresented demographic there is. Straight people, the most overrepresented demographic there is, more so than white people. So you need to just find the unique ones, right? So that's the fun ones. Those are the fun ones. So for myself, I would put down. So let me say some of my demographics. I'm not going to talk about community culture. I mean group membership yet. I'm talking about demographics. I would put. Let's see. Unitarian Universalist is my religion. It's a very unique religion. Nothing too odd, but it's just not that many of us. Let's see. I'm much older than you guys, so I would put age. Let's see. What else is there? Incredibly. No, I'm just making a joke. Yeah, so those are my demographics I put. And my group membership knocks it out of the park, right? I grew up poor, so social economics. I grew up poor. I speak multiple languages. You could multiple languages, and I'm a veteran. One of the least represented groups on faculty, by the way, just FYI. Veteran. There's my demographics, and then there's more I could put out. I'm a nerd. I'm an athlete. I've lived in other countries, right? I've had students talk about immigrant status, being born in another country. I've had students talk about demographics, sexual orientation, for example. The not the boring one, not the boring one, but let's see. I have like there's so many unique ones. Just think about it. Middle child, only child, super large family. If you have like 10 or more kids, you got like 2 or 3 kids. It's kind of boring, but more big amount of kids. That's so write down a bunch of them. And since we're doing it online, we can't do the whole hand raising thing. So in a couple days, when I see you next time, I'm going to ask you guys to go back to this thing, and I want you guys to like the demographics that of other students that you fall into. So actually, for this exercise, considering the school that I'm visiting and working with, don't put Latin, Latino, or Latina because people but the more unique ones. When people are like, "Hey, I'm," think of that. So for this exercise, because of the situation, or generic Latin, Latina, not so much, and maybe girls for this exercise. But if there's some kind of story behind it, then no TMI, nothing inappropriate. All right. So that's your participation for today. All right. If there are any questions on that, we can always come back to it in class. All right, let's finish up this lecture because we got to get going. I'm trying to make this under an hour, so you guys can do your participation and work on the outline. Let's go. Oh, wait. Before I do this, I really need to shoot this somewhere else. I'm too close to the camera. All right, we're back. We talked about this. You heard my inclusivity speech. You heard the today's participation. We got to finish chapter 6 and chapter 7. Let's go over the terms quickly. Psychological audience analysis is explorers and audience's attitude towards a topic, purpose, speaker. So this is like their beliefs, right? Their attitudes, values, beliefs, right? This is what they're thinking. By the way, it's not stereotyping, but you tend to use demographics to figure out psychological audience analysis, right? But a lot of times, groups that you might speak in front of, they'll advertise their group membership, so that they help you out in that way. Like when I worked in politics, I knew the group membership status, what they believed before I walked into an event. And I remember I maybe said in class, I always like to fight, so they always sent me to the conservative places, which was great. I loved it. Yay, psychological warfare. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Attitude, beliefs, and values. Now, I'm going to use Taco Bell to explain attitude, beliefs, and values, right? Attitude is whether you like or dislike something. And when it comes to my view on Taco Bell, I like Taco Bell. I do. I do. I really do like Taco Bell. A little too much sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. Attitude, right? That's like or dislike. Belief is whether something is true or false. So if you ask me the question, do you believe that Taco Bell is Mexican food? I would say that is false, right? Taco Bell is Mexican food. True or false? I would say false. I do not believe Taco Bell is Mexican food at all. Value. Value is the enduring concept of good and bad, right or wrong. I also add in, by the way, hint, hint on these three terms. I also add in that value has some weight to it, some weight. This is where you tend to debate is value, right or wrong, good and bad. And so when it comes to Taco Bell, if the phrase, if the suggestion is Taco Bell is a proper representation of fast food, I would say that is good. That is right. Because it is. That's the reason why I like Taco Bell. It's not because it's Mexican food, it's because it's good fast food. It's usually done very quickly, it's very filling, and it's very tasty. I love the crunch of a crunchy taco. One of my favorites. Like, of course, I don't believe Taco Bell is Mexican food. I have ordered the Mexican pizza. That's not Mexican food. No tomatoes, by the way. Um, but that's the thing. That's where you get that's where you get a lot of depth there. All right. We'll come back to this in a little bit. Credibility. Oh, there's that word again. Credibility, the most popular word in this book, which is perceived as trustworthy, knowledgeable, and dynamic. All right. One of the many factors when you're trying to convince somebody about psychological audience analysis is if you have credibility in that moment. So if you're trying to say, oh, I like I like laying out on the beach, and you're like me, who is white, and I show whether or not I'm tanned, right? So if I say I'm on the beach all the time and I don't look tan, they're not going to believe my attitude, beliefs, and value on the beach. So credibility plays a factor in helping people understand, right? So it's important to note that. Situation audience analysis includes an examination and time and place of your speech, the size of your audience, and the speaking occasion. So why you are there? What's the moment? Is it a big place? Is it a small place? That plays an important role. And so when you are doing this kind of stuff, it's good to know what the situation is when you give the speech. Um, so the speaking occasion and stuff like that. A good example is that is your first speech. Actually, all three of your speeches, which is going to be in a friendly place with fellow students. So you don't have to really overanalyze this. Last but not least, target audience. This is actually from chapter 7. Let's say you're going into an audience and you're trying to figure out how to get them on your side. What you might do is try to favor one side or another. So if you're in a mixed crowd, you're like like the classes. Most of my classes in East LA, pretty much all Latin students, right? Sometimes I have one or two other students, but pretty much mostly Latin students. Um, and then and then, but it's mixed, right? It's mixed in sex or gender identity, right? Male, female, and different roles. If I wanted to sway an audience, like for example, I'm a dude, you would think I would go after the other men in the audience, but actually I try to go after the women in the audience in the sense of trying to get them on my side, because I would naturally assume the representation of a man in front might get that group on my side already. So I would target audience would be the women of that. That's what you would do. This is more advanced public speaking. If you have questions on these terms, just save them for when you see me in our meeting. Let's go quickly through these, and then we're done after that. Psychological audience analysis, attitude, value, beliefs, and values. Just think about all the fast food that you've eaten or have ate. It's important to note that because you've had debates with your friends about the fast food that you have ate. Like, what's the best burger? By the way, when people ask me what the best burger, I do not believe that it's a good idea to debate the best burger if the burgers are different value. I mean, financial value, meaning that I don't think you can compare In-N-Out to Shake Shack because Shake Shack is like a couple bucks more. Same thing, you can't compare Burger King and In-N-Out, or you know what I mean? It just like you should compare the ones that are, but when you do, you get into, okay, well, we all like these burgers, right? And our beliefs is that as a burger that they're true, right? But then the value kicks in and you're like, but this is the best burger for this price. And then the debate kicks in because there's weight to value. And so then you're like, no, that is wrong. No, that is right. Think about it. Just think about the different places that you have ate and the debate you've had with friends. Same thing with movies, same thing with music, and so forth. And then you apply that to social issues. And there are people, we all agree, homelessness is something that okay, so homelessness is something to care about. We like that attitude, right? Belief. Something needs to be done about homelessness. True, right? Value. Little houses, little homeless villages are the way to go. Someone will be like, no, 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 that's just a band-aid. We need to increase mental health. And then someone says, no, 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 no. We need to have drug rehab programs. No, no, no. We need to see, you can see where the value part is the debate part. And so when you're going into an audience and you kind of know where they might debate you or might have mixed feelings, you can prepare for their attitude, beliefs, and values. See how that works? Scales of attitudes: interested, favorable, captive. Ooh, this is going to be close. Interested is people if they're interested in subject or they're uninterested. Favorable is whether or not they're favorable to the subject or unfavorable. There's a difference between the both of them. You could be interested in a subject but be unfavorable towards it. Like the issue of college tuition, pretty much everyone's interested in that one. But when it comes to actual increases, then you're unfavorable. So there's some variety, but it's either or, interested or uninterested, right? The last one is captive or voluntary audience. Are they there because they have to be, or are they there because they just want to be? You're in my class. Actually, if this is a dual enrollment class at a high school, that's more voluntary, right? Because you don't have to take it. You can wait till you get to college. If you're on the college campus, then it's more captive because you are you have to take it for your degree. All right. They keep going. Reflecting on audience just refers to after your speech or reflecting on your audience before going into your speech. If you know stuff about them before, that's all it is. Okay, now we're getting into chapter 7. Chapter 7 is more advanced. Look through it, but I don't want you to care about it, right? I don't want you to adapt as you're speaking. That's what chapter 7 is about. Adapting while you're speaking. That's advanced stuff, right? I don't want you to care about it. I just want you to look through it, but don't care about it. There is a question from there, maybe 2 questions. First off, cues from your audience. Cues from your audience refers to like like if you ask them a question, you're never going to ask them a question, so forget about it. But the most used cue when adapting to your audience is their nonverbals. Are they yawning? Are they rolling their eyes? Are they sitting up in their seats? Those nonverbals usually indicates your success or not, right? Or maybe they're making noise, or maybe they're laughing. Uh, Again, you don't care about it. You don't have to worry about it with your speeches in this class, but it's good to know for future speeches, right? Outside this classroom. The last part is the spectrums. This is very important, the spectrums. The spectrums are people do not fall into one or side or the other on the spectrums. So what I mean by that? Well, before I turn off the camera, turn on the camera, I want you to look at them. Individualistic, collectivistic, high, low context, uncertainty, certainty, high, low power, long-term, short-term. You want to take a picture real quick before a screen capture or use your phone to take a picture while I demonstrate it on the board. You do this so now. Going to go to the board in 3, 2, 1. There we go. All right. I'm here at Southgate. Woo! And I'm going to show you what I mean by a spectrum. All right. It could fall under one side or the other. I feel like that meme, add another one, add another one, add another one. All right. Anyways, let's see if I get this right. There we go. And we have individualistic. I don't think I have the trash can. Where's the trash can? Ooh, that was good. All right. Individualistic. Sorry, folks. I gotta dip into my collection. Oh, that's nice. These are nice ones. This is my stuff. Not found on the board. Individualistic, collectivistic. So individualistic cultures, this is, by the way, testable at minimum 1 question, maybe 2. The different ones. Remember the things I told you to write down or take a picture of? Individualistic cultures are people who tend to gravitate as listeners towards messages that talk about individual success of the person, while collectivistic are cultures that tend to gravitate towards accomplishments of the group or team, right? That benefits the community. We do not fall under one or the other. We're not this way or that way. And by the way, there is no right or wrong here. There's no right or wrong. There's just on the spectrum. That's it. That's it. So you can analyze the groups. I'm going to show you where the averages are for students in my classes that have done this with me, where certain groups fall in. All right. So let me show you what I mean. So they'll look at this like my Latin American students, right? A Mexican American student. We'll do with Mexican American versus Mexican. Actually, I'm going to do it Latin American. Latin American students. Latin American students, meaning born, raised, or living in the Americas, in America, in the United States. Um, Most of the time, students say people of that demographic fall under here when it comes to listening, right? They gravitate towards more the individualistic side, but they're not completely over here, they're here. While Latin students would say that they, meaning living or raised, south of the border, tend to be more on the collectivistic side. In fact, more actually over here. I've asked men and women. I asked the women to rate the men. I asked the men to rate the women. Where they fall under this category? Women tend to say that men fall here, and then men say women tend to fall here. When it comes to white people, my students have said that they tend to fall here, or I would say right here, right? That they fall on the spectrum. Again, there's no right or wrong. And while this tends to be European, and this tends to be the Americas and Africa and so forth, there's no right or wrong here. Like one of the most individualistic cultures in the world is the Japanese culture. It's over here. One of the most collectivistic cultures in the world is some of the Eastern European cultures over here. So there's no right or wrong, and there's no, there's a lot of mix there. So that's how the spectrum works. And when you understand that, you go into an audience and you're like, okay, well, I know that this audience is not 100%, they're more over here or vice versa. And so you can adapt better that way. It's just respectful to know that. So let's go over some of these other ones real quick. All right. And I'm going to show you the divide. I'm not going to show you where people fall under. I'm just going to show you what divides them, right? So when you're talking high-low context, high-low context, high context folks are people who tend to listen to all the message, not just verbal, but nonverbal communication. Low context folks tend to only listen to the verbal, and that's it. And the big divide here is education. If you're more educated, you tend to be here on this side. Again, there's no right or wrong. And when you're tend to be over here. All right. Education, income kind of plays a factor. Some other culture stuff plays a factor. But the biggest divide here is education, social economics, right? Social economic status. So listens to all message, exclusively verbal. Certainty, tolerance of uncertainty, and need for certainty. Uncertainty is here. Certainty is here. Uncertainty, when you're hearing a message, it could be any kind of function, right? It could be any kind of delivery style, pattern, whatever. You're taking it all in. It could be all over the place. You could take it all in. It's fine. And you tend to be you can adapt to uncertainty as well in life as well. Certainty, you need more structure to the message. You need a little bit more structure, a little bit more task orientated type stuff, and you tend to want more certainty in your life. By the way, no right or wrong, but the biggest divide here is social economic income level, right? Income level. Again, these could be on the test. What the different cultures are. That's it. That's, is this individualistic, collectivistic, high context, low context? That's how it'd be on the test. High and low power. High power folks tend to listen more toward the leadership, while low power folks tend to question the leadership. They trust the government or trust who's in charge or the elites, while low power tend to shared approaches in leaders. They want a little representation, a little bit more democracy type stuff. So this one is not one of the demographics on your thing at all anywhere. It is actually social status. So for myself as a white male in the United States, because our social status here is that more privilege. While even though you're wealthy and you're African American or Latin America, because of social status and so forth, you question because of history and other significance and so it is there. I think social status is the biggest divide here. Like who has the most privilege in that society? Men, women, right? By the way, it's not like left or right. It's, maybe men here, women here, right? So this one is a little bit more complicated than people would think. All right. A good example would be African American men versus African American women. African American men would be more over here, while African American women might be more over here. Long term or short term time orientation. By the way, I could be wrong on those assessments. I'm just spitballing here. I get student input as well to state those things. Short term, long term. Long term thinkers, they want to know of everything about possibilities, so forth. Short term, more in the present. Long term, we have time to think about it. We need to plan ahead. Short term, now. What's the biggest divide here? Age. Just think about it. Climate change. Who cares about climate change? Young people. Who cares about the inflation right now? In like more, crazed in a way. Because long term folks are like, we can get through this period. Short term is like, oh my gosh. So age is usually a big part of that. I'm on Social Security over here. See how that works? All right. So look at those. Those are in chapter 7. They're towards the end of chapter 7. Note the difference between them because you're definitely getting one question on it. All right. If you have any questions on that, that's great. Save them for when we meet. And that's it. That's the whole video. This is a long video. We're trying to catch up with the time because of the logistic problems. Make sure you do the participation, and I'll talk about it while we're getting set up in class on the next time we meet. All right. You guys have a great rest of the weekend, and I will see you next time.